All right, what's up, everybody? Miss Lynch here. This is Chapter 9, Part 1's lecture, okay? Alrighty, hopefully, okay, that's not a great start. Hopefully you have all your stuff ready to go, and yeah, you are G to G. Okay, so Chapter 9 is the Market Revolution, 1800 to 1840. And what we're going to really get into is the rise of the American economy, which sounds like lots of fun, doesn't it? No, I'll make it bearable. I'll try at least, okay? But no, so everything we've talked about so far, we're into the early United States, still a little baby nation. Very much agrarian, so farm labor. In the North, we've talked about the style of farms that that develop there, which is more like the family model. And in the South, we have talked about larger plantations that use slave labor. Okay, so we're going to talk about that more because as the economy develops, those models of North and South will become more distinct in the division between the two, okay? Okay, so I'm going to get into our first slide here. Okay. So for the first half of the 19th century, so yeah, we're starting out 1800. We're in a new century, y'all. Okay, so this is the 19th century we're in. The market revolution will change the United States. Which we'll get into that. The market revolution, a lot of it will have to do with the technologies that I'm going to hit on here in the next few slides, okay? So we will see those changes. But all of the changes that come about during this time, it's really an acceleration of developments that had already started coming into place during the colonial era, okay? Yeah, like we've talked about this in previous chapters leading up to all of this. The northern style of farming came from our Yemen class of small farmers that had lots of children. Remember, that goes back to the colonial era, all right? Slave labor, it goes back to the Spanish being in the Western Hemisphere, okay? So that has deep connections, all right? So these systems, yeah, have developed over generations, all right? Yeah, it's not just this sudden change that, anyway, yeah. It has been developing over time, so taking us up to where we're at. Okay, and like I said, I'm going to talk about technologies that change life during this, and the first thing we'll start off with will be roads and steamboats, okay? If you do not have your book in front of you, you might want to pause it and grab it because I know that there's going to be a map here in just a sec I'll have you look at. Okay, but so roads and steamboats. Transportation, okay? Just a focus of this time is improving transportation, making it more accessible, making it faster, making it cheaper, okay? So improvements in transportation increased speed, lowered costs, and it linked farmers to markets, which will be very important for our farmers, for our agrarians, okay? Okay, roads did little to help the economy. A lot of this will have to do with steamboats during this time, okay? Okay, so let's get to this next slide. 1811, we have our first steamboat, okay? The use of steamboats is especially useful along the Mississippi. Oh, it's right here. Okay, I was like, have I mentioned that yet? But no, I'll get to it here in just a second. Anyway, about how this affected things locally. Okay, but so 1811, first steamboat. It's used on the Mississippi. It was first proposed by Robert Fulton in 1807 because steamboats could gain enough momentum to go against currents. Okay, so up until this point in time, sails and wind had directed things. All right, so now steamboats can go against that. So yeah, that is absolutely revolutionary. All right. Okay, so here's this map I want you to look at. So the Erie Canal, it should be on page 253. Okay. The Erie Canal is depicted in the map on 253, but the title of the map is The Market Revolution, Roads and Canals, 1840. All right, I would like for you to look at that so you can see how much growth occurred during the first few decades of the 19th century. Okay, so the Erie Canal, this was completed in 1823. It's on that map, so you can see it from New York City going, west across New York State. Okay, see a little line, looks like a little Frankenstein scar. It's our railroad track. Okay, so this is completed in 1823, and this made New York a major trading port. All right. Up until this point in time, Philadelphia, Boston were still our larger cities in that area. So New York will really start to grow from this point on, okay? Alrighty, and looking at that map still, keep in mind, by 1837, 3,000 miles of canals had been built. So this will rapidly begin to accelerate travel west and westward expansion. So we'll see, more as we get into railroads, which I will hit on in just a second. Okay, so by 1837, 3,000 miles had been built, and this shows up here in Oklahoma, okay? So shipping as far inland as Oklahoma occurred, which Port of Catoosa, or the Port of Catoosa, I should say, in northeast Oklahoma is the most inland port. So, and it was being used during that time, okay? So we're into the 1830s, and our First Nations of the Southeast have been relocated here, okay? So Indian removal has happened. People are here. So shipping becomes an industry, okay? So the steamboat Heroine was one of these vessels. It was used on the Red River, and it would come in, so Red River, and then it would go up very southeast Oklahoma near Beaver's Bend, okay? It would go up into, I guess that's the Choctaw Nation, to bring in supplies, and it ran aground and sank, and it was excavated beginning in, I didn't put a year, I think it was 2006, I think is when the History Center or the Historical Society started excavating it. But a good portion of the ship was saved, and then the rest of it was reconstructed, and it's on display in the Oklahoma History Center. So if that's something you're interested in, it's pretty cool because you walk in and it's built to scale, so it's like you actually walk through the steamboat. I think it's awesome. Anyway, okay, so let us move on and talk about railroads. Okay, so railroads, and we will talk about this more in our upcoming chapters. And actually, I guess the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, no, we'll hit on that. It's completed in 1869, but railroad construction becomes popular during this time, okay? So 1820s, right? Okay, so the railroad system opened the frontier to settlement and connected our markets. Our first construction began in 1828. All right, in addition to this, with railroad construction, the telegraph line construction was also being worked on during the same era. Okay, so we will have telegraph communication come about, which will revolutionize communication. Became first commercially used in 1844, and by 1860, so the beginning of the Civil War, there were 50,000 miles of telegraph in existence. So, became very widely used, and yeah, like I said, revolutionized communication. Okay, the rise of the West. Okay, so whenever I say the West, we're still talking, well, I guess actually we will get into the New West, but okay, so we're still looking at mostly the Old West, which brings us to pretty much Chicago, a Mississippi River, okay? But that movement to go to these new areas will rise in popularity during this time and will then lead to the next wave, which will take us to California beginning in the 1840s, okay? So 1849. So that's where you get the 49ers, gold rush, all that jazz, which we will get to, but for now we're still kind of looking old Northwest area, okay? So improvements in transportation and communication made possible the rise of the West. Like I said, railroad being built. Okay, yeah, and if you will look at this map on 256 entitled Travel Times from New York in 1800 and 1830, you can see that in 1800 you could only go like, well, if you're looking at your map, you can see this, you can only travel a short distance. And by 1830, how much further you could travel, well, it has different times listed for you, but yeah, railroads made it possible for people to travel much further, much quicker. So we will just see that grow in popularity, okay? But by 1840, 7 million Americans, there we go, lived west of the Appalachian Mountains, with Ohio being the third most populous state, okay? So Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, this becomes the cool place to be. So people, like I said, that will become the old Northwest, but people really start traveling to that area. Okay, the Ohio River, which we've talked about before, but so the Ohio River was a boundary between, it will become the boundary between free and slave societies because of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. It prohibited slavery in the Old Northwest. So we talked about that because it prohibited slavery, but to begin with, people brought, if they had slaves, they brought them with them. That was really all I had said about it at the time when we talked about it. But so, you know, that was 1787, so we're a generation down the line. So that has, that's actually a very interesting point. Now that leads me to more questions. That first generation that went there that had slaves with them, I don't know to what degree slavery in that area was able to thrive, so to speak, grow at all, or if it just kind of diminished and imploded on itself. Anyway, I don't know the answer to that. Worth researching. But anyway. Okay, so our Northwest Ordinance prohibited slavery from moving into our new areas, okay? Okay, I think that this is the last kind of thing I wanted to hit on for this part of the lecture. Okay, so let's look at what is going on in with cotton and how this is going to affect things in the South, okay? All right, so the market revolution and westward expansion together heightened the nation's divisions regarding labor, slavery, and all things in between and regarding that, okay? Okay, so cotton production rose with the invention of the cotton gin, okay? Introduced by Eli Whitney in 1793. And yeah, this will just increase the amount of cotton that can be produced. And the way it's proposed is that it would relieve some burden of labor on slaves being forced to cultivate cotton. But in reality, the way it plays out is that it will just increase that burden and increase expectations to increase output, okay? Okay, so yeah, this revolutionized American slavery because, like I said, that the expectations being placed on the cotton industry will just grow over time because of this, okay? I know you guys have heard me talk about technology and how